Amid the rugged terrain of northern Algeria, the Kherrata Gorge appears like a massive cut between towering cliffs. Here, an old road, as narrow as a knife's edge, clings to the rock face and hangs above a deep abyss. For decades, its sharp bends, narrow surface, and constant risk of falling rocks have turned the road into a nightmare for anyone who travels through it. Yet on this very dangerous terrain, Algerian engineers have begun constructing an entirely new road. They are cutting deep into the mountainside, building bridges across the ravine, and drilling tunnels through enormous masses of rock, creating a safer transport route for the decades ahead. Today, join Mandarin Tech as we explore how humans are transforming an almost impenetrable gorge into one of the most spectacular roads in North Africa. Every day, trucks must travel one behind another along a road barely more than 3 meters wide, where even the slightest steering error could send them plunging into the bottomless void below. On one side stands a cracked wall of rock that could collapse at any moment. On the other lies a cold, deep abyss, making the entire road appear suspended between life and death. Few would imagine that this road has existed since 1865, when the French opened a route through the mountains to support resource extraction and the transportation of goods. At the time, the population was sparse, the number of vehicles was minimal, and demand for trade remained highly limited. Yet over the decades, that small road became one of the most important transport arteries in all of North Africa. Every shipment traveling from the mountains to the Mediterranean coast had to pass through here, turning the once modest road into a massive bottleneck that was frequently congested, especially during the rainy and tourist seasons. The most dangerous situation occurs when two trucks meet head-on. A slight miscalculation while one of them reverses could lead to tragedy. For this reason, local people gave the road a haunting name, the Kherrata Death Road. Behind Kherrata's majestic beauty lies a 160-year-old road struggling under the weight of heavy trucks and steadily increasing traffic, gradually reaching the limit of what it can endure. The Kherrata Road can therefore no longer survive through temporary repairs. It requires a complete reconstruction to serve traffic for many decades to come. In 2014, Algeria launched a major project to widen the entire Kherrata Road. Their goal was to transform a narrow, dangerous, 150-year-old route into a modern national highway, wide enough and safe enough for large vehicles to travel on for decades to come. To realize this plan, engineers had to redesign the entire road with a series of large-scale components. Back in 1865, the French built the road according to the transportation needs of that era, which resulted in an extremely narrow roadway. Later, when engineers attempted to upgrade it, nearly the entire old structure had to be replaced: the roadbed, the pavement, and the sections clinging to the mountainside. Over a distance of approximately 7.2 kilometers, they built 3 bridges with a total length of about 396 meters, widened 13 sections using large steel beams ranging from approximately 30 to 60 meters, and excavated 4 tunnels through dense mountain massifs with a combined length of about 457 meters. These tunnels allow vehicles to pass through the mountains instead of navigating tight curves on cliff edges, significantly reducing accident risks. In addition, new retaining walls, drainage systems, and 15 box culverts were added to protect the road from heavy rains and frequent rockfalls in this area. In segments where the mountains were too steep or where the old road no longer had room to expand, tunnel excavation or steel beam extensions became the only viable options. In other areas, engineers had to add concrete retaining walls, soil anchors, and steel mesh rockfall barriers. These measures not only stabilized the new roadbed, but also protected drivers from rocks falling from the high cliff faces, a very common hazard in the Kherrata Gorge. But all of that was only true on paper. When the project entered the actual construction phase, engineers had to face one of the most complex terrain conditions in Algeria. The Kherrata Gorge is unlike any other place. It is a space so narrow it feels suffocating, where sheer rock walls press tightly against the road, while below lies a deep, plunging void. The old road was so narrow that bringing materials, steel, cement, or structural beams into the site became extremely difficult. This was not just a dangerous place for ordinary travelers. Even placing a single excavator became a challenging problem. For example, to install a 160-ton beam in a very narrow area, 2 cranes with a lifting capacity of 400 tons each were required. But because the road was too narrow, it was impossible to set up 2 cranes. In the end, workers had to slide the beams on a platform and install them right at the edge of the abyss while suspended from a crane. Positioning a beam in a space barely wide enough for one truck required not only extremely high precision, but also absolute safety for the workers. Just one small mistake in handling could cause the beam to slip out of position or destabilize the equipment. Situations that are extremely dangerous in the tight, mountainous terrain. The next major challenge did not lie on the road surface, but deep beneath it. The geology of this area is extremely complex. Layers of hard limestone are interspersed with sections of weathered rock, and many cracks widen over time, leaving the old roadbed in a constant state of instability, especially on the segments clinging to the mountainside. During construction, workers also had to face continuous risks of landslides and falling rocks, forcing every operation to be carried out with the highest level of caution. When conducting detailed surveys, engineers discovered that many locations were completely unable to bear loads if the road were widened using traditional methods. Therefore, before installing any structural components, they had to reinforce the entire foundation. This work included drilling micropiles, installing soil anchors, and building new concrete retaining walls to stabilize the slopes and create a solid base for the widened roadway. Only when the foundation was guaranteed to be absolutely safe could they deploy the special structural system that allowed the road surface to be shifted inward without encroaching further into the rock face. This was the key solution of the Kherrata project, widening the roadway at locations where no construction space remained, while minimizing the amount of mountain excavation. The riskiest task of all. All these factors turned the Kherrata project into a true engineering challenge. Every meter of completed road represented a difficult step forward, earned through the persistence, caution, and steady effort of the construction teams. People working between high cliffs, narrow paths, strong winds, and the constant threat of falling rocks. Once the final tunnels had been opened, the bridge spans installed, and the new road surface completed, the Kherrata construction site entered the comprehensive inspection phase. The drainage system, retaining walls, guardrails, and rockfall protection mesh were tested before the road was officially open to traffic. The new route is wider and more stable, allowing large vehicles to travel safely through the gorge. After years of construction under harsh conditions, the project replaced the dangerous old road with a modern transport corridor, creating more convenient connections between Algeria's mountainous interior and the Mediterranean coast. The Kherrata Gorge lies on the national highway connecting the province of Béjaïa with Sétif, 2 major economic centers in northeastern Algeria. This 4.3-mile mountain road runs along sheer cliffs, hugging narrow and deep ravines, forming the only route linking the town of Bordimira with Kherrata for decades. The terrain here hardly allows for any alternative routes, which is why all trade activity between the mountain region and the Mediterranean coast depends on this treacherous passage. Despite its dangers, Kherrata has always been the main transportation artery, carrying goods from mountain communities to the coastal areas. For many years, it has borne every type of cargo, daily necessities, agricultural products, forest timber, and even construction materials transported to the port of Béjaïa to support industrial development. As urbanization accelerated and the regional economy expanded, the demand for transport surged, sending thousands of trucks and buses through this route every day. From a harsh mountain path, the road gradually became a severe bottleneck, where even a single vehicle slipping, breaking down, or slowing for a moment could cause miles of backup, especially during the rainy season, when fog, slippery surfaces, and falling rocks made conditions even worse. But what made Kherrata widely known was not only the congestion, but the extreme danger people faced every time they passed through. Each year, tragic accidents occur on its narrow bends, where even a slight steering mistake can send a vehicle plunging into the abyss. The cause is not the drivers. It is the road itself, too narrow for large vehicles to pass safely, too deteriorated to withstand growing traffic pressure, and too vulnerable to weather, from falling rocks and landslides to fog that obscures visibility. Under such conditions, Kherrata has become one of the routes that local residents must traverse with constant tension and fear, even though they are familiar with every curve of the road. The terrain here is described as a pathway to hell because on one side of the road is a sheer cliff constantly weathered by the elements, and on the other is a drop of about 98 to 164 feet. The cracks in the rock widen over time, and even a small trigger, such as rain, vibrations, or temperature changes, can cause rocks to fall. When driving through this section, extreme caution is required because even a slight steering mistake can send a vehicle plunging into the abyss with no guardrails for protection. Combined with the rapidly increasing number of heavy trucks, the risk of accidents has surpassed the point of control. Therefore, the Algerian government decided that the entire route must be rebuilt to modern standards to ensure public safety and maintain the region's economic activity. Seen from above, the road cutting through the Kherrata Gorge appears only as a tiny ribbon tucked between two massive walls of rock. But for tens of thousands of people in the Beaya Setif region, it is far more than a transportation route. For more than a century, this road has been the shortest and most essential link for moving goods between the mountains and the Mediterranean coast. When the road is blocked, an entire region is almost cut off from the world. When an accident occurs, nearly all economic activity comes to a halt. That is why rebuilding the route is not only a construction project, but an act of restoring the rhythm of life for an entire community. Now, with reinforced road sections, new tunnels that reduce the risk of falling rocks, and protective retaining walls on both sides, people can travel without living under constant fear. What seems ordinary in many parts of the world, a safe, stable road, is an invaluable gift to Kherrata. Beyond safety, the new road opens the door to development. Tourists can access this majestic mountain region more easily. The economic value of the entire area is unlocked as transportation costs decrease and connectivity becomes seamless. For the Algerian government, the Kherrata Road is proof that investing in infrastructure does not only create new projects, but also brings trust and hope to the population. For the engineers and workers who labored here, the project carries an even deeper meaning. It stands as evidence that humans can create change even in places where nature seems to say no. Through perseverance, creativity, and determination, they turn the impossible to build into a safe and sustainable road. A reminder that sometimes the greatest achievements are not defined by the size of a structure, but by the impact it has on the everyday lives of people. When looking back at the journey of Kherrata, we do not simply see a mountain road. We see a cross-section of history where nature and humans collided, struggled, and ultimately found common ground. For decades, Kherrata was a symbol of helplessness, a road too narrow to develop, too dangerous to travel with peace of mind, yet too important to abandon. And then, among those towering cliffs, people chose not to step back. Every meter of road reinforced, every rock treated, every structural element installed was not just technical work. It was a declaration that wherever humans need to go, engineering will find a way. Kherrata today has not changed the shape of the gorge, but it has changed the rhythm of life across an entire region. Trucks no longer have to stop out of fear of the abyss. Drivers no longer have to silently pray each time they pass a blind curve. And families living in the mountains, for the first time in decades, can experience something that others have long taken for granted: a safe, stable, and reliable road. Behind it all is the mark of hundreds of engineers and workers. People who chose to stand where nature seemed to say, do nothing. But through perseverance, they turned the impossible to build into a testament to human capability. that even a dangerous gorge can become a bridge for development, for hope, and for the future. And in the end, the story of Kherrata is not the story of a single project. It is the story of how people rewrote the fate of an entire land with nothing more than a road.